Alright, today I'm going to be going through a carburetor on a 1982 Yamaha Maxim 750. This style of carburetor and the rebuilds are going to be almost identical on the 650s and a lot of the 750 models. This just happens to come off of a 750. So first thing we're going to do is inspect the carburetor, make sure that there's no damage to the intakes here. Going to flip it over, make sure there's no damage to the butterflies here. Make sure that our throttle, when we pull the throttle or twist the throttle, that these butterflies open and shut properly. You should be able to let them go and they'll snap back all the way. To sync a carburetor, you've got a couple different screws right here to adjust it. And then also you have got your screws on the top here to adjust and sync your carburetors. Up top here is your choke plungers here. There's 4 of those, ones for every carburetor. And you take, and this cable mount that is installed here, your cable runs through into your choke lever here. When you pull your choke lever on your handlebars there on the left hand side, it's going to pull all 4 of those plungers at the same time. You want to make sure that those are free, make sure they snap back down. So that's just kind of a quick overview. Another little test that I do a lot of times to make sure our diaphragms are good. When you have your carburetor set right here, take compressed air, blow through. You can see what happens is your slide will go up and then it'll slide back down. If it doesn't go up or doesn't slide back down, then you've got an issue up here in your diaphragm, or potentially your spring is jammed up in there, your needle is maybe stuck. There's lots of different options there, but if you spray your compressed air into this top inlet here and your slide doesn't go up and doesn't come back down freely, then you've got issues. I'm going to pull one of these bottom bowls off here, and I'm just going to do one of the carburetors because all of them are actually identical inside of there, and there's no reason to pull them all. I'm just going to bowl here to pull off. I've gone through and cleaned and inspect all of them, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I sometimes will leave those screws just a little bit loose. That way I can pull it off quicker, make this video a little shorter for you. You don't have to watch me turn these screws out 25 times per screw. So we've got 4 screws here, like I said, 4 Phillips screws. These are going to be larger screws in your top cap, so they'll be pretty easy to keep those separate. We've got a drain for your bottom bowl here. On each carburetor, they have a drain. These both look the same, but on one of them, they're going to have a flat screw running into the side here. You unscrew that a couple turns, and you're going to have fuel dumping out this bottom nipple here. You want to make sure that you've got a fuel line on here, and you want that flowing underneath of your motor as opposed to right directly on top of your motor. It's going to cause some discoloration, potential fire hazard there. So we've got 4 screws undone here. I like to try to keep those all together. We've got a gasket here that you want to replace if it's damaged or weathered and destroyed. A lot of times when you order a carb kit, this gasket will come with that. Alright, now we've got our bottom bowl off here. One other thing with this bowl is you want to make sure that you've got no debris, anything sitting down inside there. One thing about these carburetors is if there's any debris sitting down here, you twist your throttle, your motorcycle is sitting there idling, it could potentially suck that debris that's in your bowl area up through your jets here. If it doesn't clog your jet, that debris is going to go into your motor, which isn't a good thing. More than likely, it's going to get plugged up into your jets there. If you've got pilot jets here that are plugged, your bike will have a really hard time starting. So keep that in mind. If your bike isn't starting, first place I would check is these pilot jets here. These pilot jets are a very small orifice jet, and they get plugged easy. This is your main jet here, a larger orifice. They look identical just by looking at them sitting here, but this is going to have a larger orifice. You can buy these jet cleaners that will typically use a kind of a mid-size jet cleaner to clean your main jet. Your pilot jet is going to use what I've made here as a jet cleaner, and that's just a fine strand of wire. This is out of just a wire cable. I use one of the strands to clean out my pilot jets because that's about the size of it. It's very, very small compared to the rest of your jet cleaning tools here. So take the pilot or the main jet out. You've got a washer. Clean those parts up really good. You do want to make sure that you can see through those jets, pilot jet and main jet. You want to make sure you can see through them. Again, here's your pilot jet here. This is a 40 jet, so a size 40. So just, again, a really small orifice, but you do want to be able to see through there once it is clean. We have got your needle and seat here. Your needle jet is right here. This is your float. We've got two plastic bobbers, I guess you could call them, on either side here. And these are adjustable, but you want to make sure that they are, that these needles, this needle seat here is cleaned out really well before going back together. Take and push this pin out. It's these are aluminum posts here, so make sure you don't use a hammer and a chisel and just start pounding on these to get this pin out, because you will break these off and you'll be buying a new carburetor because these are not replaceable. So go ahead and pull that pin out there. There's that pin, and then we can just then lift your float off of there. It's got your needle jet underneath of there. Like I said, this is adjustable. You adjust this little tab here. Now, you want to make sure you can adjust it to the settings in your book. If you've got fuel constantly dripping out of the bowl of your carburetor, then more than likely your needle seat is damaged, your seat is damaged, or your float height isn't set right. So if you put your bike on a trailer in the back of a pickup, a lot of times you'll see a little bit of fuel drip out from underneath of your motorcycle there. That's because that fuel is sloshing around in your bowl because your because your float is opening and shutting slightly, allowing too much fuel to sit in your bowl area. Now that's pretty common for that to have happen. What isn't common is if you come in to your garage or your shop and underneath of your motorcycle is a puddle of fuel. You obviously have, more than likely you have a needle issue. After you get your float and your needle valve out of there, we've got your seat that sits directly underneath here. These will sometimes get squared off. Use a 10 millimeter, loosen those up there, and you can pull those out. Be careful, you've got a small thin washer underneath of this needle seat here that you want to make sure goes back in there. You also have a screen right there underneath of that needle valve, this needle seat here, that needs to be cleaned. Make sure there's no debris. What happens is that from your fuel tank, then that fuel comes into your carburetor. Your carburetor's here. This line runs all along here, dumping fuel down into your carburetor. Your needle valve, then the screen here should protect any kind of debris as long as that screen is in good condition. Should collect any kind of debris that's running through your fuel lines there. If it doesn't, it's going to come up and get lodged in between your needle valve and your seat here. If that doesn't lodge it, it's going to come and sit in your bottom bowl area and potentially get sucked up through your jets there. So that screen in good condition will save you a lot of debris that was potentially in your fuel tank that runs into those fuel lines, and it should stop here. But that is a common issue, that that debris will sit in here. Plug this screen up. Your carburetor's not getting enough fuel, your motorcycle's not getting enough fuel, and your bike's not running right. So you're going to make sure that you either replace these when you rebuild your carburetors, or inspect them, clean that out, use carbon choke cleaner, blow through there. What you don't want to do is take your air hose, blow through it just like this here. You're going to damage that screen. You're going to end up replacing those. From a distance though, you can take and spray those off. Just clean those out. You also can use carbon choke cleaner just to blow through there and clean out. Carbon choke cleaner isn't going to hurt anything on here, but we'll leave that out for now as we continue to get through our carburetor here. So now what we're going to do is flip this up. What you do, you want to be careful again not to break these posts off when you flip this over. A lot of times if you're cleaning all your carbs, all your bowls will be off of here and those posts won't be protected. So we've got, again, 4 Phillips screws on the top here. And I'd like to take my finger, put it over top, and just hang on to this cap. This is spring loaded. It's not a heavy spring that's gonna, you're gonna lose your eye when you pull this cap. But I'd just like to make sure that I have control when that cap is taken off of there. You have your choke arm there that's kind of in the way of taking those that screw out, and then you have your throttle cable mount here, or a brace there that is kind of gets in the way there. So once we got those 4 screws loosened up, take that out. Just remember where that goes. If you're just taking one carburetor apart, it's not going to be hard to lose track of where those are at. Go ahead and pull that other screw out there. Now this choke arm is going to be potentially in your way. You might have to lift that up to pull this cap off of here. And then there is your top cap there. It's off. There's your spring there. It's out. And then your diaphragm and your slide and your needle here. I like to take my finger, get underneath of there, push this out. Just being really careful you don't rip this diaphragm. Now one thing to watch is a lot of times those diaphragms, because of the heat of the motor, heat of the outside, just over time, a lot of these rubber diaphragms will kind of melt, and not bad, but they'll kind of stick to this actual carburetor when you're pushing this up. So you just want to make sure you kind of get underneath there and pry that up just like that. There is your needle there. Here's your slide. Here's your diaphragm. So inspect all those. What you do want to be able to do, and so you can see it here, take that needle. That needle you should be able to push up and down just like that, and should spring back down. To take this out, you can replace these needles. These are a non-adjustable needle. So you can take, but you can take this cap off of here. It's a 6mm Allen cap, and underneath there is a spring, but there is your cap there. And then we've got your spring that sits down in there, and then directly underneath that, you have your needle there. We'll take and dump that needle out there. You can pull this plastic cap off of there. It just slides on and off. It is a little bit of a challenge, so just be careful. I don't like to do that because sometimes you can damage that needle just gripping it with pliers or trying to slide that cap off of there. You can clean it, inspect it, look it over really well, just like this, but you do want to make sure that this needle is free from any kind of buildup or debris. Going back together then, just drop that down in there, make sure it slides all the way down. You can just take and pull it with your other hand there. Same thing, drop your spring down there, take your plastic cap there, and make sure that spring seats properly. Take and screw that on, make sure you get those threaded on there straight so you don't damage those threads. And then the little test there to make sure you have everything installed correctly. Just tap that needle, make sure that springs back into place. I take and fold this diaphragm over. One more thing before I go back together here. You can take and spray this all out with carbon choke cleaner, inspect it, use compressed air, blow that out, make sure there's no debris. Also take a rag. I don't like spraying carbon choke cleaner on this diaphragm because it'll shrink and expand, and you got to just dry this out. Just let it sit for quite a while before you put it back together. So I just take carbon choke cleaner, I'll put it on a rag, and I'll wipe this all down, make sure it's in good condition, make sure it can slide up and down freely without any issues. We do have a little rubber tab here on this diaphragm that we're going to put on this carburetor. It is right here. You can maybe see that in the video. This choke arm here might be in your way, but that rubber tab's going to sit there. The other thing, you want to make sure that your needle is going down into position. Don't take and just cram on it, or you are going to break that needle, damage that needle that way. One other thing here before I go back together, underneath here is your main jet holder here. It's just a tube that runs up here, and you can see it. You may not be able to see it, but down in there is that tube. You can actually take and push that up this direction, and by doing that, you can take and clean that out really well. A lot of times you can take compressed air, carbon choke cleaner, and blow through here and clean it out good enough to where you don't have to do that. I just don't like to potentially damage this larger post here, this aluminum post, or this brass fitting here. 99% of the time this fitting does not come with a carb rebuild kit, so I typically would just leave those in there and blow through it. When you are running your motorcycle, what's happening is your needle is running through here. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it. So your needle's running here. I don't want to rip this diaphragm, but I want to show you what's going on here. So you take that needle there, this slide is going up and down just like this. We've got your main jet that sits here, and what's happening is that slide and that needle are going down and is stopping fuel that's coming up into your carburetors here. You twist the throttle, go wide open throttle. This slide's going to come up. The butterfly in behind there is going to open, and fuel is going to get sucked up from your bottom bowl area here. If you've got performance done to your bike and you've got a larger main jet, your wide open throttle right here, that's going to allow more fuel to flow through your main jet area. If you've got a different size needle, maybe a shorter needle in there, you give it a little less throttle, say like that, and you're going to be pulling more fuel up there, or that fuel is going to come quicker into your motor. So a little bit longer screw, or a little bit longer needle, and you're going to have to give it more throttle for that fuel to be completely flowing through there. Your pilot jet, your smaller jet there, is going to work when you are starting the motorcycle. There is your pilot jet is being used when your bike is just sitting there idling and your needle is completely all the way down, plugging your main jet, so it's sitting just like that there. And so that is when your idle jet, and I'll show you those ports here when we flip your carburetor over. But this would be idling. You give it a little bit of throttle, this needle's going to come up. It's going to allow more fuel to be flowing through your main jet there, more fuel to be flowing through this main jet holder like I showed you a little bit ago. Wide open throttle, you've got the largest amount of fuel flowing through those ports there. So going back together then, fold this diaphragm over, take your finger, stick it underneath of there. Make sure that diaphragm seats properly, goes into the right position there. Take your spring then, I still keep my finger underneath that slide, because if I don't, you see what happens there? I push it like this, it's going to suck that diaphragm out of position there. So I like to keep my finger in there, I like to keep that slide about halfway up. That way everything can seat properly, as well as that diaphragm does not slide too far the wrong direction. Line that tab up, stick that spring in there, get your cap lined up, set that on there. We do have your choke arm kind of in the way there, so keep that in mind. You put that in there properly. Take at least 2 of the screws and get those started. We'll go on the other side there and put your the cable mount here, and then start these screws. I'm still holding onto that cap. Holds this diaphragm in place before we take our finger off here. So you get 3 screws in there, and that diaphragm's going to stay in position while we take and get our last screw set into place there. All right, we're going to take and flip this carburetor over. I want to show you a couple things before we go back together with that bowl there. We have your idle adjust that I didn't show you yet. Essentially what that is doing is taking your butterflies and opening them up. So you turn your idle screw here, and I wouldn't do more than a quarter turn at a time. Make sure your bike is completely warmed up. You turn it clockwise, and that's opening these butterflies up. Also, like I told you earlier, here is your adjustment here on these, so that these all the carburetors are synced and working, all have the same amount of airflow, all have the same amount of fuel flow when you give it throttle there. So make sure that snaps back into place. All right, going back together with your lower end here, then you've got your needle seat there. Again, make sure that those ports are cleaned out. You can take compressed air, blow through there. You do want to make sure that your other needle valves are off before you do that, because if you blow through with compressed air, a large amount of compressed air, and your other needle valves are there, you could potentially damage the floats there. So snug these up with a 10mm wrench there. Your larger orifice there is your main jet. Set your washer underneath of there. That's a brass washer. Take a larger screwdriver there and snug that up. Pilot jet is here. Again, your pilot jet is primarily used for idling and starting. Snug that up. Take your float there. Doesn't matter which direction this needle goes on there. Slide it on there. Slide that down into place. You grab your pin there. Slide it through. Might have to come in from the other way because of this idle adjustment here. Slide that into place there. Inspect your gasket again. Make sure that's in good condition. And then you can go back together with it. All right, we've got these 4 Phillips screws snugged up there. And that is a carb rebuild video on the Yamaha Maxim 750. Also, like I said, the 650 is going to be exactly the same. If you've got questions on this machine, let me know those. Let me know comments and questions below on this video here. If the video has been helpful, please share this with friends and family. Please subscribe to my channel for hundreds of other service videos on motorcycles, ATVs, watercraft. If there's something you'd like me to shoot a video on, make sure you leave those in the comments below. Thanks for watching.